Hey guys, it's rant time. Over the past 100 years or so, widely consumable art has evolved to become a medium that is capable of capturing the furthest reaches of the human condition, and as technology has advanced in areas of the internet, file compression, filmmaking, and even transportation, the consumption of all forms of art has become increasingly accessible to the general public. And before I say what I'm about to say, this wide range of accessibility is very much a good thing, a great thing even. The wonders of technology have provided any given person the opportunity to not only create, but also share their creations with anybody who cares to really pay attention. However, big old however, I think that a progressive and exponential increase in the saturation of art forms has led to a decrease in the ability to comprehend and process any certain niche that the consumer is not actively engaged in. This all sounds very complicated, but really what I'm saying is that your grandparents thought there was a non-zero chance that Ozzy Osbourne might have actually been a demon for this very reason. The infinitely complicated mosaic of genres and styles of music has led to niche circles building sounds and environments founded on in-jokes, and without a comprehensive understanding of any given subgenre, it is sometimes kind of hard to get into it in the first place, as communities can sometimes feel alienating to more casual enjoyers of a sound or of an artist. But I'm not really here to talk about a genre or artist in particular, although some genres definitely lean more heavily into this phenomenon. I am primarily focusing on the idea that people will reject what is unfamiliar or morally compromising. What I'm actually really interested in is why music seems to be the only art form in which morality has the least amount of personally detached commentary and freedom of expression. Think about it this way. You sit down with a friend to watch a movie, as you've done many times before. You pick Joker like the based clown-pilled Chad you are, and at the end of the movie, your friend goes, "Holy shit, I can't believe that Joaquin Phoenix killed Robert De Niro. I cannot believe that Mary Harron would condone the adulation of the excesses of capitalism. I cannot believe that Anthony Burgess would condone overt violence and sexual impropriety. I can't believe Jonathan Swift wanted to eat children. Leonardo DiCaprio did. What?" It all sounds like a very silly point to make because it kind of is. Of course the actions of fictional characters do not reflect the real world views of the actors who portray them. Of course the perspective of a book's narrator does not always have to be that of the author writing it. And this concept is known and fairly obvious to most people who consume these forms of art, so why should music be any different? And to go ahead and get this point out of the way, because I do know that it will be brought up, yes, most of the time music is very much autobiographical, much more so than its co-workers in the occupation of being an art form. And so before I begin to start ranting and complaining about things that I have not stopped thinking about for the past week, I do think that this is important to acknowledge. Because music, for most creators and consumers, is autobiographical, or at least mostly so. Writing about one's feelings and personal experiences is the most common way to write music, I would argue, and even when someone portrays themselves as having fault or hurting somebody else, it is never done so in a way that would actually risk any possibility of the listener actually being upset with the said artist's portrayed actions. Think about it this way. In Olivia Rodrigo's recent hit song Vampire, a song about feeling exploited and abused in the aftermath of a relationship, has the lyric, "You called them crazy, God, I hate the way I called them crazy too." Although Olivia, to some extent, is recognizing some sort of fault or misstep in the past, and as a result dismissed other women who were previously in her position, I highly doubt that anybody listening to that song would hear that lyric and assign blame to her over the subject of the song, who was unnamed but not only acting abusively towards her, but also in exploiting an age gap between them. So it's not like she's saying that she did something so awful that her actual listener base would condemn her for it, but she is admitting to something in the past that she sort of acted in fault out of a very difficult situation. You can't blame her. That's not something you can blame her for. You don't get mad at Olivia Rodrigo for that. And I mean, most songs in the entirety of the emo genre have no issue with self-depictions of fault, misdeeds, and overall hazy morality if you read between the lines a little bit. One of the most popular emo songs of all time literally says, "Once a whore, nothing more, I'm sorry that'll never change," and everybody screamed it back. And yes, I know that Hayley Williams famously regrets that line and has omitted it from live performances, but I do think that it is still a good example of how listeners can overlook certain qualities of a song's morals if they can either be molded in a way to align with the listener's views, or if the listener simply doesn't think they have a dog in the fight and therefore doesn't care. But I think that the major contention for me that separates songs like those, where this sort of depicted morality of the singer's perspective is never off the edge enough to be disagreeable, and the type of questionable morality that I am referring to is when what's being said isn't relatable for everybody, or even just the general crowd, and doesn't immediately line up with societal standards and the typical conventions of songwriting. There are two areas of this that I kind of want to dive into, one purely being the depiction and explanation of morals that are not typically agreed upon, and the idea of telling morally gray or corrupted narratives in songs, being fictional. We'll start with the more autobiographical presentation because that's really what most music is anyways. AJJ is a folk punk group from Phoenix, Arizona, formerly known as Andrew Jackson Jihad, an intentional head-turner of a name that was later changed to its colloquial and already frequently used abbreviation. They are one of my favorite bands and are going to be getting a lot of mileage from me in this video because they fit so well into a couple of the points that I'm trying to make. The style of songwriting employed by Sean Bonnet and company is one that has dazzled me and many other fans for many years. The wry yet still sheepish humor mixed in with incredibly raw and harrowing depictions of the existential landscape of America makes for incredibly unique songs, whether you love or hate them. And due to this style of songwriting that Sean does, the listener will often come across lyrics that challenge typically agreed upon societal beliefs and depict emotions or situations that require some level of nuance to interpret them in a way that doesn't immediately write off the band as a bunch of crazy people. Taken at face value, the song Bad Bad Things is fucking bananas. And I don't even agree with everything that they write into their songs as a fan, but I think that presenting a narrative where the listener is not being spoon-fed previously agreed upon perspectives and instead asked to think about what they believe in and how they view the world are incredibly important, especially in an industry where relatability is one of the most marketable qualities of the product being sold. I value the idea of consuming art that isn't shocking for the sake of being so, but rather presents a philosophy different enough from mine to force me into a position where I must personally confront how I feel about these things. AJJ has a song called Candle in the Wind from their 2008 album Only God Can Judge Me, and I think that it acts as a pretty good example for the point that I'm trying to make here. On my first listen to the track, I thought that the opening lyrics were the funny kind of desperate, saying that in some people's eyes, despite the accumulation of more money than one has, being sort of against the general ethos of the punk movement, Sean is okay with being rejected from that label in that regard if it means financial stability, because as he puts it, he cannot survive without money. And I agreed with that too. I too would probably rather have financial security than acceptance from a movement that I had once considered myself a part of, and so I kept listening. Sean then goes on to sing the lyrics, "I support animal testing. I'd kill a kitten to save a human being." And I was listening to that and I was like, yeah. Huh? And there I was, listening to music from a band that I enjoyed, presented with a bold statement that I wasn't really sure that I agreed with or I thought was even morally correct. And that, dear viewer, is the sort of confrontation that I believe to be important in art. The song goes on to describe how the human race almost instinctually fucks over everybody and is destroying the world and how bad that is. I agreed with this as well, but then I went back to the kitten line and I kind of thought about it a little bit more. Do I agree with that? Would I kill an animal if it meant saving the life of a human? Well, of course not. I love animals, but then again, I also value human life. So what the fuck? And that's why I believe that this approach to art is sort of important to have, because it puts you in a position where you are encouraged to confront your own personal beliefs and think about your philosophy on life, your morality. Instead of a relatable or agreeable opinion being presented to you, instead of consuming media in which there's already been a predetermined understanding that you already hold the same views as the ones about to be presented to you, there is now conflict, questioning, and introspection. It's turned towards you. I know that hearing the phrase art is supposed to make you uncomfortable due to its pretty frequent usage immediately makes many of you picture a snarky Reddit forum commenter deflecting the earnest criticism you just made against the latest Banksy piece, followed by an immediate permaban from the mods for inciting superficial arguments, but there's some truth to it. And yeah, no, not all art needs to provide these ethical dilemmas that put the listener into uncomfortable scenarios for the purpose of understanding yourself, but it definitely has a place in the vast ocean of music because, like other art forms, music has the capacity to provide these experiences that maybe other art forms can't in the same way. But once again, however, the point that I'm trying to make is a dangerous line to walk because with the genuine attempts to create art that challenges perspective, there will always be Not to beat a dead horse with a dead horse, but I don't like Tom MacDonald too much. He's what many would refer to as a bad faith actor and what I would refer to as a contrarian. And as much as I don't want to give him or his music any sort of airtime, trust me, it's been done enough already, him and his music are a pretty good representation of a counter-argument to everything that I just said, being, how can I, Mel, support the existence of morally compromising art, but reject and condemn music sharing viewpoints that I think are disagreeable enough to get mad at, not just avoid, such as Tommy Boy's music here. For example, let's take a look at Tom's massively popular with 12-year-old boys and suburban grandfathers song, White Boy, a song that he claims is a anti-racism song that's been distorted from many different angles. And that's kind of the shitty part about critiquing the song while also assigning value to controversial art, because this song is a piece of reactionary work meant to inspire anger and clicks made by a grifter who desperately wants to be the oppressed and the oppressor at the same time. It's disingenuous. But Mel, how can you claim that is disingenuous? You don't know what's going on in Tom's head. Yeah, that's kind of the issue. After I make my argument for what I believe to be important, morally challenging art, the white boy weasels his way into earnest discussions and muddies things up a bit. But the arguments he's making are not morally gray or healthily challenging, they're just meant to make you mad and also sometimes kind of creepy. No one thinks you're homophobic for not wanting to date guys. There are many different body types. Skinny does not equal normal. Do you think that groping is just like, okay, what does this even mean? Who is saying this is how anything works? Tom MacDonald's whole career is making up a person, getting mad at them, and then profiting. So before we moved on in the video, I just kind of wanted to sort of clarify that while I believe art that presents you with morally compromising situations is important to consume, there will always be people making reactionary art in bad faith meant to generate outrage and divide, not discourse. Sorry to bring the mood down, moving on. Apart from art meant to elicit thoughtful conversations and questioning, the other area that I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit was bit weird because it's not like I have a bunch of empirical evidence to back any of this up, but I do feel like that a lot of the time people will listen to songs with narratives and assign the perspective of the song one-to-one with the artist's beliefs, which is a weird thing to do, I think, right? Something media comprehension, but whatever, it's kind of true. Remember that song that I mentioned earlier by AJJ, Bad Bad Things, and how if taken at face value, the song would be, quote, fucking bananas? If you're unfamiliar, here are the lyrics. Take a good second to read them right now. After listening to the song, do I truly believe that our dear friend Sean in a folk punk track from 2007 is admitting to the murder of an innocent family? Do you believe that? Most of you would say, no, of course not. I'm at least somewhat kind of sane, and I know that this is a pretty brazen example, but I do know that I'm also at least kind of right, because in 2022, the governor of California signed the Decriminalizing Artistic Expression Act, a bill that limits the use of song lyrics as evidence in criminal trials. So if a bill like this exists, there is a non-zero amount of people who hear fictitious depictions of morally compromising situations, such as violence, theft, and general impropriety, and take them at face value as if the artist singing or rapping about these situations did exactly as described or depicted in the song. And don't get me wrong, in the past, some people have definitely made art depicting or describing heinous acts that they have committed, but then you have people like Lil Tecca, who self-admittedly is just making things up for the sake of the art form.
I don't have no straps for nobody. I don't got no straps.
Or people like Sean, who are telling stories through the art form of music. And as I said earlier, due to it being autobiographical in nature most of the time, music has a little bit harder of a time establishing fictional stories more so than books or movies do, because that's just kind of like not what people are used to hearing in songs and in music they consume. They're a lot more used to that in movies and books. And I would argue that this section of the video does have a little less weight to it than the defense for morally compromising viewpoints that are autobiographical, but music is such an amazing medium for storytelling that there should be a higher general awareness that not every song you hear is supposed to be real. Anyways, enough preaching, let's conclude. I know that this video was a bit more of a rant than a focused and researched essay like the previous videos in this format, but it's something that I think is really interesting and would love to hear more people's thoughts on. I know that it's maybe a little more of a divisive topic than normal, but I do value that discourse, and if you disagree with anything that I've said so far, I truly would love to hear your perspective. Nothing is set in stone. I change my opinions on things all the time as new information comes in, so it would be really cool to hear your thoughts. Until next time, bye.